It is Friday. It is time for our National Town Hall meeting with Senator Bernie Sanders, Brunch with Bernie. Senator Sanders, welcome.
Good to be with you, Tom.
Great to have you with us. A lot going on in Washington, D.C., although I guess you guys are now officially on vacation?
Well, I wouldn't call it vacation. We're not in Washington.
I know you wouldn't, because you're constantly out there talking to people, but some of your colleagues. Anyhow.
All right, here's what. Before I get into the vote on Syria, and I voted no on that, and I spoke on the floor, and I want to talk about that in a minute. I want to pick up on an interesting article that appeared in Media Matters. I don't know if you saw it, Tom, and it talks about the degree to which the television networks covered campaign finance and money in politics and Citizens United.
Right.
If you were to ask me, amidst all of the terribly serious problems that working families, the middle class, our country faces today, I would have to say at the very top of my list is the issue of campaign finance, is the issue of this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision, is the issue that billionaires are now able to buy elections and that the Koch brothers and other billionaires are spending hundreds of millions of dollars. Because no matter what issue you're interested in, jobs and the economy, minimum wage, pay equity, if you're interested in climate change, global warming, if you're interested in education or healthcare, all of those issues are impacted by campaign finance and Citizens United and the ability of billionaires to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to elect candidates who will represent the rich and the powerful in the fossil fuel industry. It's an enormously important issue. I was stunned that when we had the vote a week ago Thursday, there was almost no media coverage of the vote. Every Republican voted against the constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. Totally partisan vote. Every Democrat and the independents voted yes, we need to go forward with a constitutional amendment. Every Republican voted no. And there was a debate that went on for a number of days before that. Do you know how much news coverage the New York Times gave to that issue?
I don't.
Zero.
Oh, yeah.
Zero.
Yeah.
And Washington Post did a little bit better, not much better. Turns out that Media Matters, which they looked at the television networks. This is what they found. Since February 2013, when the Supreme Court accepted McCutcheon for review, NBC's Nightly News and Meet the Press covered campaign finance for a total of 17 minutes and 36 seconds over a year and a half.
Wow.
CBS's Evening News and Face the Nation combined for 17 minutes and 32 seconds. ABC World News Tonight was even worse. In other words, the most important issue facing our country, the degree to which the big money interests are now able to control the political process, the degree to which the Republican Party is now benefiting from that, gets virtually no coverage. And I think that is a sad state of affairs. And I want people, to understand that no matter what the New York Times or CBS or NBC says, this is an enormously important issue. What they also point out is, by the way, PBS did a very good job and has devoted a lot of time to this enormously important issue.
There's a real significant difference here. PBS does not, if $1 billion is spent on a campaign, probably $980 million of it is spent on television. And PBS doesn't get any of that money, and CBS, ABC, NBC get all of it.
To the nut of the issue here, and that is that if you are a television station and the Koch brothers and others are pouring huge amounts of money into you, you know what? May not be an issue that you want to talk about a whole lot.
Right.
But it gets back to something that you and I have chatted about a whole lot. Who determines what is most important, what the news is? And very often you will find media into gossip, into speculation, whatever they're into, rather than looking at the real issues that impact ordinary Americans. And that's something, that we've got to continue the fight on. All right, let me switch gear here for a moment and tell you, yesterday there was I think, extremely important vote. And ostensibly what the vote was about was whether or not the United States, whether the president will have the authority to provide training and support for so-called Syrian moderates. And I voted against that for a number of reasons. The main reason I voted against it is that I believe that at the end of the day, effort against ISIS or ISIL, whatever you want to call them, which is a terrible, brutal, dangerous organization. It is not going to be won by the United States. It will be won by the countries in that region, Muslim countries who may be Sunni or they may be Shiite, who are going to have to stand up and take these guys on. And what I fear is that, in fact, what this ISIS group wants, and they're pretty smart guys, what they want to portray to Muslims throughout the world is that this is a war between the United States and Muslims. This is a war between the West and the East. This is a war between Christianity, if you like, and Islam. And I think that we should not fall into that trap. Now, one of the points that I made in a speech on the floor yesterday, and most people don't know this, is that the country in the world which has the fourth largest defense budget, more than the United Kingdom, more than France, is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is spending almost $60 billion a year on the military, and that's a figure which some people think is pretty conservative. They have a significant fleet of modern aircraft. They have an army. And the question that should be asked is, why are they, who are certainly a lot more threatened by ISIS than is the United States or Europe, where are they in the struggle? Where is Kuwait in the struggle? Where is Turkey in the struggle? And where is Qatar in the struggle? Why is it that the United States is leading the effort? And I think we should be supportive, and I support the President's airstrikes. There's an important role for us to play. But the question is, how do you win a war when it is portrayed as the United States versus ISIS rather than the countries in the region, the Muslim countries, fighting their own fight with our support? That worries me. And second of all, I have a real time defending and understanding how taxpayers in the state of Vermont or Michigan or California should be putting money into this war when you have the royal family of Saudi Arabia who are worth hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. You know, I don't understand why people in this country can't afford to send their kids to college or paying more in taxes or going deeper into debt nationally, rather than some of the wealthiest families in the world in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait. So those are the concerns that I have. And the other concern that I have is that once we get wrapped up into military involvement, it is harder and harder for the Congress and the media to begin focusing on the other major problems facing this country. Real unemployment, 12%. Youth unemployment, 20%. Minimum wage, starvation wage of 7.25 has to be raised. Pay equity for women who are earning 77 cents to the dollar for what a man earns. Climate change, the need to transform our energy system, campaign finance reform. There are enormous issues facing the American people, which I fear very much are going to be shoved underneath the rug by the Congress and by the media while we focus on Middle East all of the time. So a number of reasons why I voted against that. I voted against the war in Iraq in the first place. And I want to conclude my thoughts on this by saying I think the president has been unjustly criticized. Unlike Bush and Cheney, who got us into a war in Iraq, I think the president is trying to think his way through this. But I disagree with his decision, and I look forward to seeing Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Qatar and all these other countries come to the table and defend themselves, and then get our support.
It's Brunch with Bernie, our hour-long national town hall meeting here with Senator Bernie Sanders. We'll be right back with your calls for Bernie.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And check out Senator Sanders' website, sanders.senate.gov. You can easily track him down just with his name over both on Twitter and YouTube and Facebook. And welcome back. Paul in South Lyon, Michigan, watching Free Speech TV on the Dish Satellite Network. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Yeah, Senator, I saw you on one of the Sunday Republican talk shows, and of course all of the questions were trying to get you to criticize the Democrats.
Right.
I want to commend you for having the courage and honesty to not take the bait and for calling out the dysfunctional billionaire media on the show. I was shocked to learn it was your first appearance since you've been one of the only independents in Congress for years. You should be more in demand than anyone. Are you as outraged as I am that the billionaires control almost all of our public airwaves, and what can we do about it? Thanks.
Well, Paul, thanks very much for your question. I was on Meet the Press last week, and Paul is right. I've been in Congress for 24 years, longest-serving independent in American history, and it was the first time that I was on. I appreciate them putting me on. But I think if you look at the folks who get on the Sunday talk shows and the folks who get a lot of the media attention, you know, they are not going to be there representing and fighting for the rights of working families in the middle class. So nothing much shocks me, Paul. I've been around a little bit too long. But I want to reiterate one point, is when you turn on the TV in the morning, you pick up the local newspaper. The point to know is God didn't determine what's on the front page or what's on the news. These are human beings often working for corporate interests. And their determination of what is important is very different, in my experience, from what the average American thinks is important. Let me give you one example, Tom. Earlier this last week, Congressman John Conyers of Michigan and I introduced legislation to provide 1 million jobs for low-income young people. Youth unemployment in America, Tom, is 20%. What do you think about that? 20%.
Wow.
You don't hear much about that.
And it's even higher in minority communities.
And it is in African-American communities, it is 33%. Yeah. Now, that sounds to me like a crisis. How much do you hear about that?
Not at all.
Okay, it's something that's wiped out. But you go to communities all over this country, and people are saying, I don't know how my kid's going to get a job. I don't know how my kid is going to be able to pay off college debt. There are 5.5 million young people in America who have either dropped out of high school or graduated high school. And you know what they're doing? They're doing nothing. They don't have a job. And I think that may give us some explanation as to why we have more people in jail than any other country on earth. Because many of these kids are hanging out on street corners doing nothing. They're looking forward to nothing. And the further that they are away from the economy, the longer they don't get a job, the harder it will be for them to get a job. You drop out of school, you don't get a job for a year or 2 years. You know what? There is a real chance you will never have a job. And if you never have a job, how do you survive? You do crime, you do drugs, or whatever you do, and you end up in jail. Rather than getting the job training you need, the education you need, and getting into society and being productive. But this is an issue that gets almost zero discussion, but it is an enormously important issue. So I have long understood that there is a correlation. Sometimes what I see in the media is just, you know, ridiculous stuff, it's gossip stuff, and yet really important stuff, like billionaires controlling the political process, youth unemployment, hardly any discussion at all. And we have got to change that. We have got to demand serious discussion on the serious issues facing America.
Senator Bernie Sanders with us. Our Brunch with Bernie hour. We'll be back with more of your calls for the Senator right after this. Welcome back. Senator Bernie Sanders on the line with us. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour, our national town hall meeting with the guy I think of as America's senator, on the line with us. You're there with us, Senator?
Right here.
Okay. Hope in Chicago. You're on the air with Senator Sanders. Hope?
Hello.
Hi, you're on the air.
Hi, it's an honor and privilege to talk with both of you this afternoon. I am a precinct committee person in the Naperville Township in Illinois, District 28, which has been very historically conservative Republican, but I'm very glad to say it's changing through the years. And I have a comment and a question. Yesterday there was a caller who called in and who was very concerned because he felt that the government was going to be shut down repeatedly again in Obama's last 2 years. And, you know, that may or may not happen, but I feel what people should be more concerned about presently is if they do not vote in this midterm election and we lose the Senate, I feel the Supreme Court stands a huge chance of going ultra-conservative. And then we will have a scenario that we should really be afraid of, which is domination in all the three branches of government. And I would like to know, I feel like we should be messaging that the GOP is also government, and they are the government opposed to people. We already know they're obstructionists, so we need a new a new advertisement.
Let's let Bertie get in here.
Let me say this to Hope, who is a committee, an activist,
Precinct committee person.
Committee person now.
Yes.
First of all, thank you. You are the unsung heroes, you and many others, of American democracy. And we need more people to do exactly as Hope is doing in 50 states in the country. It ain't sexy, it ain't glamorous, but knocking on doors and making phone calls and talking to people is precisely what it is all about. As I think many Americans now know, the Republican vision of democracy is to do everything they can to suppress the vote, to make it harder and harder for older people, younger people, poor people to vote, to work as hard as they can coming up with gerrymandered districts, which are convoluted, which work to their political advantage. People don't know this. Democrats in the last national election, members of the House, Democratic candidates of the House, got a significantly larger vote than did Republicans. But because of gerrymandering and so forth, Republicans control the House. And thirdly, their idea of democracy, after suppressing the vote and gerrymandering, is to allow billionaires to be able to buy elections. That's their vision of democracy. And our vision has got to be very, very different. And one of the things that all of us have got to do is exactly what Hope is doing, and that is do grassroots effort. The pundits predict that all of 40% of the American people will be voting in this off-presidential election. 60% will not. And if that happens, it is, as Hope fears, very likely that Republicans may gain control over the Senate, which will be a disaster for working families in this country. And the antidote is to raise that voter turnout. If you go from 40 to 50%, in my view, not only the Republicans not take over the Senate, they will lose the House. So our job is to bring out the vote, to make sure people understand what Republicans stand for, and that is huge tax breaks for the wealthy and large corporations. Under Bush, their effort was to privatize Social Security. In the Paul Ryan budget in the House, transforming Medicare into a voucher program, massive cuts in Medicaid, massive cuts in food stamps. We could not get one vote this week in the Senate for a bill for pay equity for women. That's who these guys are, and the American people have got to understand that.
Ed in Klamath Falls, Oregon. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hello, Senator.
How are you?
I'm doing fine. I got a simple way to end the problem over in Syria and Iraq. All we do is pass a law in Congress like you have for Cuba. Make it illegal for Americans to be there, and they will stop having their heads cut off.
Well, I don't know that that's the approach that I would advocate. People have a right to go where they want to go. ISIS is a brutal and dangerous organization. The real question, I think, is what is the smart way of defeating ISIS? I think they've got to be defeated. And what I have argued is that it cannot be the United States of America leading that effort. It has to be the countries in the region, Muslim countries, Sunni countries, Shiite countries, with American support, with the support of the UK, with the support of France, with the support of the international community. This cannot be an American war against ISIS. It has to be part of a broader coalition.
Yeah. Oh, we just have 10 seconds. And do you think that the Saudis are going to step up, Senator?
Well, I think that they have got to do that, and I think that they have got to know that the United States, our taxpayers, our soldiers, can't do it for them.
Yeah. Senator Bernie Sanders is with us, taking your calls in our national town hall meeting here, Brunch with Bernie on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with more of your calls for the Senator right after this. Be sure to check out his website, sanders.senate.gov. And he's got a very active Facebook page as well over at Facebook, and a great Twitter feed. But on sanders.senate.gov, you can also sign up for his newsletter, The Bernie Buzz, and it's a great news aggregated site.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 866-987-THOM.
So check it out, sanders.senate.gov. We'll be back with more of Bernie and your calls right after this. Occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and it's our Brunch with Bernie hour. Senator Bernie Sanders taking your calls in our national town hall meeting. And Robert, excuse me, hang on just a second here. Click the wrong button. Robert in Cathedral City, California. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Yes, how you doing, Senator Sanders? I have a question. If you run for president, would you consider Kshama Sawant as your vice president?
I have not met her personally. I think I'm going to meet her this week, and I'm going to be in New York City as part of this huge effort on climate change. But I hear she has done some very, very good work in Seattle. Was one of the leaders there in helping to raise the minimum wage. But I am still a long way from deciding whether I want to run, let alone who will be my vice presidential candidate. But thanks very much for the call, Robert.
Kathy in Madison, Wisconsin, listening on the mic, 92.1 FM. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hi, Senator Sanders. I'm so proud to talk to you. My question is, on the Internet, there's been a lot of talk about how involved John McCain and Lindsey Graham were with starting ISIL or ISIS. And now I'm looking at an article that's saying that they actually have been lobbied by the Saudis to sell the war, which is certainly what they have done. I feel manipulated, that our country is being manipulated while we just stand by. So I'm just wondering what your comment would be. Are these things that are going around about John McCain and Lindsey Graham, which certainly many people are saying is true, how do we deal with that? It doesn't seem right for a senator to be doing.
I have to tell you that I have not followed that discussion. I mean, I obviously know John McCain pretty well, and I know Lindsey Graham. I think the issue here is they have their views, and their views are, in general, very aggressive foreign policy views. I think Lindsey Graham has been quoted as saying that he believes the United States should start sending troops into this foray into Syria. I strongly disagree with him. In terms of Saudi Arabia, the point that I made a few moments ago is that this country is an enormously wealthy country. This country has the fourth largest military budget in the world, a larger budget than France or the UK. And this is a country that has a very significant air force and army. And I think the American people have a right to say, why are we defending them if they're not prepared to defend themselves? Where are their resources? And this is not just a question of money or just even manpower. Symbolically, this war, this military effort cannot look like it's the United States against the Muslim world. Muslims have got to be involved, and they have got to stand up. It's not just Saudi Arabia, it's Turkey, it's Kuwait, it's Qatar, and it is Iran. So I think we should be supportive. But I strongly disagree with Lindsey Graham, who talks about putting American troops on the ground. That is something I categorically disagree with.
Richard in Alamosa, Colorado. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Good morning, Tom. Thank you for your program, and thank you, Senator. It's an honor to speak with you. I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I want to thank you for your brave vote yesterday and for all that you do for veterans and chairing the Veteran Affairs Committee. For the home of the brave and land of the free, we don't need any more Gold Star mothers or increase their ranks. In rural Colorado and rural America, the veteran bill that was passed has left us really with no additional benefits, and the VA doesn't want to listen and communicate with organizations. We've actually formed a veteran coalition. There are several in Colorado. I'd like to invite you to the January 15th meeting. But is Congress going to take up this bill and start to deal with the problems that have not been addressed? For example, the 40-mile regulation actually eliminates almost all of 5,000 veterans in the valley where I live, because there is a clinic that can't do anything more than give you a flu shot, test your blood pressure, or take blood. And we keep losing our doctors. We've been without a doctor for as long as a year and without nurses for as long as 6 months.
Okay, let me jump in, Richard, and thank you very much for your service and for your support. Let me tell you what we did do in the bill and what is happening with the VA. Number one, I agree with you. I'm not familiar with the situation in Colorado, but I am familiar with the situation in the United States. And that is that we have a significant shortage of doctors and nurses and other medical personnel. And that's why we put $5 billion into this legislation. And I can tell you that the VA is now actively starting the process of trying to bring more doctors and nurses and other medical personnel into the VA. So I hope and believe that legislation will impact every facility in this country which is understaffed. And if that's the case in Colorado, it should impact you as well. In terms of the 40-mile plus, I hear what you're saying, and I don't want to go into all of the details, but the VA has discretion to allow and spends, what was it? I think it was almost $5 billion last year contracting out. So if there are people who need certain types of medical help that their local community-based outreach clinic, CBOC, cannot give them, they can get that help. They can go to a private physician or another type of physician. So that is up to the discretion of the VA. And lastly, I know that Secretary McDonald has asked every VA in the country to have town meetings, to reach out to veterans, bring them in, and to say, you tell us what the gaps are here, what you need to happen. And I hope and expect that's happening in Colorado as well.
Ken in Ticonderoga, New York. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Good afternoon, Bernie.
Good afternoon.
I voted for you in '82 in Burlington to run the town. I'd like to see you run the country, but leave that aside for the moment. How about we get some equal play for energy retrofits here in the country so we can help make the Middle East irrelevant? When we talk about putting, hundreds of millions of dollars into blowing people up, we ought to be spending an equal amount here, retrofitting homes, $2,500 a piece average. For $500 million, you do 200,000 homes. You make Middle East oil go away as a reason for relevance and strategic importance.
Ben, that is a great question. You make a great point. A few years ago, I authored a bill with Bob Menendez of New Jersey called the Efficiency Block Grant, Energy Efficiency Block Grant Program, which brought billions of dollars, I think it was $3.5 or so billion all over the country into energy efficiency and sustainable energy. And Ken's point is absolutely right. What we've been doing here in Vermont, and I know many other states have been doing it, is putting money into weatherization and energy efficiency. And what we have in Rutland County here in Vermont, there are about 1,000 homes that have been weatherized. The result of that, Tom, is that people see a 32% reduction in the amount of fuel they have to use. 32%. And obviously that means there's 32% less carbon going into the atmosphere, and we are creating jobs as well. So I believe absolutely that Ken is right. And it's not a question of spending hundreds of millions. We should be spending many, many billions of dollars. And this will pay. This will pay for itself, because when people's fuel bills go down, they'll be able to pay off the loan that they needed to retrofit their home. So Ken's point is a very, very important point, and I agree with it.
Zachary in Chicago, Illinois. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Thank you for taking my call. Senator, I just wanted to let you know I'm so proud of your work that you're doing and your moral character. I actually named my son after you. And what can I do to encourage you to run for president? Because we need you as bad as we need oxygen. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's very kind of you. Look, let me just say a word on this presidency issue. I was in Iowa last week, and I know you and I did the show, I think, on Thursday, Tom, and I think I was out there over the weekend, and we had a great time, and the turnout was really, really very good. We had 450 people on Sunday night in Des Moines, which I gather is a very large crowd for Iowa, and it was an enthusiastic crowd. I think the issue is that the American people know that something is fundamentally wrong with our country when so few people have so much and so many have so little, and when we're seeing a collapsing middle class while billionaires are doing phenomenally well. And the American people want these issues discussed. So I, as I've said many times, I am giving thought to it. But if you do something, you want to do it well, and this is a massive undertaking. We've got 50 states in this country. We'd be taking on the Koch brothers and the other billionaires. And it would be, how do you put together a strong grassroots movement in 50 states? Is there support for the kind of ideas that we're talking about? How large is that support? So those are some of the things that I'm thinking about. But I can say that the trip to Iowa I thought was pretty good, and there is a lot of support for the ideas that we talk about.
And with the Democratic primaries coming up, are you leaning toward running as a Democrat if you do?
Well, there's arguments both ways on that one. I am the longest-serving independent, but there are pluses and minuses of running as an independent, pluses and minuses running as a Democrat. That's something I'm trying to sort out as well.
There you go. Senator Bernie Sanders with us, taking your calls in our Brunch with Bernie hour. We'll be right back with more of your calls for the Senator. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And be sure to check out Bernie's website, sanders.senate.gov. And you can also track him down quite easily. A very, very large website over on Facebook and a good Twitter feed. And welcome back, Josh. Hang on just a second here. Got to hit the right buttons. Josh in Algona, Iowa. You are on and thanks for watching Free Speech TV on DirecTV. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Tom, a huge fan, and Senator Sanders, please, when you come back to Iowa, you got to make a stop in Algona. It's the county seat of Kossuth County. We'd love to have you. Please come to northern Iowa.
My geography of Iowa is not good. We're going to be in Johnson County. Is that anywhere near where you live?
It's about 2 hours south. I'd love to come and see you, that's for sure.
Okay.
When you make your run, Senator, and you got to visit all 99 counties, we'd love to host you.
Okay. Is that what you got? Is 99 counties?
99 counties, yeah.
Kossuth
County was supposed to be 2 counties, but it was about 2 miles short, so we were at 99 counties.
Wow.
But anyway, Senator, my question for you actually answered my original question. So my other question was, why are we having such a hard time getting Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Turkey, and everybody in the Middle East to step up to the plate and take care of a problem that affects them way more than it affects us?
No, you're exactly right, Josh. That's exactly right. Look, this ISIS is a horrible organization. It is a murderous organization, a terrorist organization. Dangerous organization. It is awful. But if you think it is a danger to the United States, it is a heck of a lot greater danger to the nations in the area. As Joshua said, we're talking about Saudi Arabia, you're talking about Kuwait, you're talking about Qatar, you're talking about Turkey. And what Josh is asking is, where are these guys? Why aren't they defending themselves? Why aren't they taking on ISIS? I think there are two reasons. Number one, they have grown into the habit of thinking, why do we have to do anything? The United States of America is there. Their taxpayers are there. Their armed forces are there. Their young people are there. Why should we have to do anything? That's number one. And number two, to be frank with you, all of these countries are autocratic countries run by zillionaire families. And I think they have a fear that if they get involved in this war, there may be uprisings or revolts within their own countries. But that speaks to the need for these countries to democratize, to give power to their own people rather than just the royal family. But the bottom line is, the longer we do it for them, the longer we defend these. Saudi Arabia, my guess is that family is worth hundreds of billions of dollars. They have huge amounts of oil money. I think Americans are saying, I don't understand why our taxpayers, our young men and women, are defending them when they don't want to jump into the foray, especially when they are spending the fourth largest amount of money on defense of any country on earth. They're spending more than the UK and France. They have a lot of military resources. And before our kids get involved in that war, I think maybe they want to defend themselves.
Another irony is that the Saudi government and the Saudi royal family are both large buyers of U.S. bonds. They are essentially loaning us money and then asking us to spend that money that we borrowed from them on defending them.
Right. I mean, it's a little bit crazy. But again, it's not even the money is important. Whether the loss of life is obviously enormously important. We don't want to lose more men and women in war. But what is perhaps even more important, at the end of the day, in my view, and people who know more about this agree, you don't win the war if it's the United States against them. They are going to have to win the war themselves.
Yeah, this is a regional conflict. Senator Bernie Sanders with us, taking your calls. Back with Senator Sanders in just a moment. Stick around. The Thom Hartmann Program is underwritten in part by Wix.com. Welcome back to the place where we dare to ask, is Walmart a person? Is Hobby Lobby a person? No, I don't think so. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour. Senator Bernie Sanders taking your calls. And Jody in Lexington, Kentucky, you are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Thank you for your vote yesterday, Senator Sanders. I totally agree with you. They need to step up to the plate themselves. My question for you is about the Democratic Party, however. In the 2008 election, they had a forum that all people could participate in and give their ideas on strategies and issues. Why have they pretty much closed that door? Why don't they want to hear from us anymore?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, Jody. And I believe, it's not what I believe, it's what the facts are and what every poll shows, is there is growing discontent with both major political parties. I think people perceive the Republican Party has become a far-right party, and people perceive that the Democratic Party is not standing up, taking on the big money interest and representing working people. So I think if the Democrats are going to be successful, A, they need a 50-state strategy. They can't ignore large parts of the country. And B, they have got to open up their doors to ordinary people. And I think what has happened, it's been exacerbated by Citizens United and big money in politics, is with 24 hours a day, you got a lot of these guys who are forced to go into fundraising events, and they are ignoring the grassroots of the Democratic Party. And I think at the end of the day, as important as money is, and it is important, there has to be more reaching out and involving ordinary citizens in the political process. What are their views? What are the issues that they think are most important? What role can ordinary people play in the political process? I happen to believe that grassroots politics is where it is at. There's nothing better, nothing more effective than knocking on doors and talking to people.
Charles in Chico, California. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hello, Mr. Sanders.
How are you?
Charles, you're on the air.
Thank you, Senator Sanders, for taking my call. I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I've been very concerned. Hi, thank you for taking my call.
Yeah, you got to listen to your phone, Charles. The TV has a delay. Just ignore the TV or turn it down and ask Senator Sanders your question.
I've become very concerned about the high suicide rate amongst veterans, and I've looked into some of the outreach programs that the VA is doing. I'm a Vietnam veteran, and basically, I find there's not a real outreach program for this going on in the VA. Could you shed some light onto that, please?
Sure. Well, first of all, Charles, thank you very much for your service. And I think, if I can say this, everybody, or virtually everybody, recognizes that the way Vietnam vets were treated when they came home was horrendous. They were said thank you, and they were just sent off back home without jobs, without training, without the kind of health care that they needed. And hopefully we have all learned a significant lesson from that. Charles, I think the issue of suicide and mental health among returning vets or vets in general is of real concern. The suicide rate, especially among younger veterans right now, is of real concern. We are likely to do a hearing just on that issue when we return from the break after the election. We, in various states around the country, there are outreach programs. I helped bring in some money here in the state of Vermont for the Vermont National Guard, which does a very effective, I think, outreach program, just knocking on doors, talking to veterans, checking in, see how they're doing, seeing what kind of help they and their families may need. That effort may not be as strong as some other states, but there is federal money going out there into the VA to do just that. So, Charles, you're right. It is a very serious problem. I think we're making some progress, but I do think we have to do a lot better.
Zach in Phoenix, Arizona. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Senator Sanders, how are you?
Good.
Good. I just have a question. Everybody is asking you if you're going to run for president, but as your supporters, I think some of us would like to know who you would vote for.
If you were not running.
If I were not running. Well, I don't know who will be running. I certainly am not going to vote for the Republican candidate, that's for sure. If there's a primary and I'm not in it, we'll see who is in it. But it's a little bit premature because I think there are no announced candidates right now. But obviously, Zach, as I think you know, I am perhaps the most progressive member of the United States Senate, and I want to see a progressive candidate run, and I want to see a progressive candidate become the next president of this country. The working class and the middle class of this nation need not only a voice, but they need action. They need somebody who is going to take the case to Congress that instead of worrying about the millionaires and billionaires, maybe it's time to worry about the vast majority of the people in this country who are losing ground economically.
Senator, we have about 45 seconds to wrap up the show. Your thoughts?
Right, let me just say this, and it's kind of my usual mantra here, is Republicans do well when voter turnout is low. And they would like to see lower-income people and younger people not voting, and they make it hard for those folks to vote. But on the other hand, if people are serious about beginning to address some of the monumental problems facing our country, I can tell you that a Republican Senate and the continuation of a Republican House will move us in the wrong direction. It will mean more attacks on Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, education, nutrition, environment. I'm just trying to think that if the Republicans gain control of the Senate, it is likely that the next chairman of the Environmental Committee will be somebody who doesn't even acknowledge the reality of climate change. And that is obviously not something that we want to see happen. So I hope everybody puts their shoulders to the wheel and that we get out a large voter turnout and that we do everything that we can to spread progressive ideas.
go. Senator Sanders, thank you so much for being with us today.